Each year, athletes from across the globe converge on Haines City, Florida, test the limits of their bodies and the resilience of their spirits at Ironman Florida 70.3. This documentary invites you behind the scenes of an athlete's return to triathlon after a forced 4-year hiatus, a story of grit, ambition, and unwavering dedication. From early morning swims to relentless training rides beneath the hot and humid summer sun and pounding footfalls on winding roads, we will witness the evolution of a competitor with a humble and grateful heart striving for redemption. But this is more than a race. It is a voyage through adversity and triumph. Through moments of doubt and bursts of inspiration, there will be setbacks and surprises, victories large and small, and the discovery of the true meaning of perseverance. Join us as we chronicle the milestones and missteps, the sweat and celebration culminating in one unforgettable day. This will not only be a tale of athletic determination, but a portrait of the human spirit, undaunted, unbreakable, and ever reaching for the extraordinary. Welcome to Ironman Florida 70.3, an endurance athlete's journey. Welcome, everyone. This is week 4. So welcome to Ironman Florida 70.3 Endurance Athlete's Journey. This is my weekly video of my prep for Ironman Florida 70.3. This week, I had a planned training volume of 17 hours and 20 minutes. When it was all executed, it wound up being 17 hours and 49 minutes, so it was a tad bit long. Most of that comes from the strength side, which has a little bit of volatility in terms of being able to keep it under an hour or 40 or around 45 minutes, just waiting for machines and such. But overall, I think I executed it well. I'm feeling better than I did last week. So looking at the video from last week, I look kind of like death warmed over. It was a hard week last week. This week, it was another hard week, but I'm trying to pep myself up so I don't look so downtrodden and worn out. But I think that this was a fairly successful week. It was busy, to say the least, but everything got done. And so I'm just going to jump right into this. So let's talk about my run training this week. I had a total run volume of 16.6 miles. So it's slightly down from last week, which was to be expected because in last week's video, I talked about where I wasn't really feeling comfortable with the 6-minute run interval. As you know, I'm doing a run walk protocol for this race. So I'm still searching for that optimal combination of run and walk intervals. So I dropped back down to the 5 because that's where I felt more comfortable at that level. And so I just kind of wanted to go back and test it out and see if it really, is better than the 6-minute was last week. And this week, I think it felt much better. I felt in much better control of the run. I was able to execute some good pacing during some of my progressive runs. And I just felt solid. I did start a new round of anti-inflammatories this week, as I've mentioned, on a previous episode, where with consultation of my orthopedic, we are on a 12 days on, 12 days off protocol for some prescription anti-inflammatories to help. I was finding it that by that 12th day, when I was about to cycle on, I was in significant discomfort, and the quality of life just was really struggling. So I made the decision to shorten that duration. So now I'm doing a 12 days on, 6 days off. And so that's what I executed this round. And so I was only off of it for 6 days. By that 6th day, I could feel things heating up. And, so I was trying to be a little bit more purposeful with my recovery. I broke out the Theragun a few times. I got into the Normatec, I think just once. I really do wish that I had the bandwidth to kind of get into that stuff a little bit more. But some things would have to be sacrificed in order for me to spend that time or figure out how to multitask some things, which is reasonable. Maybe this week I can figure that out and maybe do some multitasking and get into my Normatec while I'm laying in the bed and just have my laptop on my lap doing some work. So maybe I'll test that out this week. So it's a good thing that just came to me while I'm recording this video. So it took a few days of being on the prescription for it to really kind of settle in. Today was probably the first day I felt really, really good, which is actually kind of interesting because yesterday I had, my long bike and run. Usually those kind of beat me up a little bit, and so going into Sundays are usually a little bit of a I don't want to say a disaster, but it's challenging, pretty sore and kind of beat up. But today I felt great actually. So I'll talk about that as I progress through this video. But I think that this is a good protocol for me to use going forward for this training plan. Once the plan is over, then I'll reassess, what I'm going to do with that. I'll definitely be taking some time off, which in and of itself is going to be a challenge for me because I don't typically like to do that. But I made a commitment to myself when I agreed to do this race that I was going to take some time off post race to kind of recover, give some muscles and joints a chance to deload and really kind of think things through and figure out what I'm going to do next. But so let's get back to this running. So I liked the 5-minute protocol. So what I did was for my short runs, I still used a 5-to-2 ratio. So it's a 5-minute run with a 2-minute walk. My moderate runs are a 5 to 2.5. So my purpose behind that is I wanted my rest interval, my walking interval, to be half the duration of my effort duration. So that's why I went with the 2.5-minute walk for those moderate runs. I think that went pretty well, actually. I liked it. Some of the pacing that I was able to execute felt good. It was on the higher end than what I was pushing. And so I think that this is a nice mix. So this week I'm going to test out a different method or just an extension of this method. And I'm keeping the 5-minute run interval, but I am altering the walking interval for the shorter workouts, for the shorter runs. So this week I'm doing a 5 to 1.5. So I'm removing 30 seconds of walking and just doing the 1.5 minutes of walk and kind of see how the body adapts. So it's these small little adjustments back and forth, just trying things out, seeing how you adapt, and that's how this is done. And it's a reasonable and responsible way to go about it, just changing one thing at a time, tweaking things here and there. That's how, we adapt and figure things out. So I think that, like I said, my runs were pretty solid this week. I felt like I executed good form, really kind of thinking about engaging the full foot on the foot strike. As that heel starts to heat up a little bit, I have a tendency to disengage the big toe. So I'm kind of like landing on the side of the foot to try and protect the heel from the full impact of the run stride. And I'm really focusing on trying to ignore that and remind myself, no, engage the toe, drop the whole foot. I want the whole foot to make contact with the ground and just roll with that. And it's good practice. So on Saturday, I had kind of like it's not necessarily a brick session because I'm not at the stage of the training plan where I'm implementing brick workouts. There are sessions during the week where I am running and cycling close to the same session, but the order in which I am doing them, I'm running first, then I'm biking. There's a specific reason why we implement brick workouts into our training plan, and I'm not there yet. We do have a podcast out. I think it was like episode 8 or it was something like that. But you can go to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast and check out our episodes. There's one called The Purpose of the Brick Session or something to that matter, where I go into pretty significant depth about why we implement those types of workouts and what's the reason behind them, how I personally use them in my training and how I implement them in my athletes' plans. But at this stage, I'm only in week 3 and there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to have a brick workout this early in the training plan. But for scheduling purposes, I need to make sure that I can get in 5 rides and 5 runs a week. So that means that I'm going to be running and cycling on the same day. And, in order to fit in the strength workouts as well, I do a run bike session. But like I said, I'm running first. and then I'm jumping on the bike because I don't want to go into the run feeling fatigued from the bike. At least then when I run and I'm coming in and I'm able to jump on the bike, my body's already warmed. So I really don't need to spend a whole lot of time doing a warm up. I still have it in there in the training session, but my body's already warm. And so it's just a nice way to go about it. I have not typically used this approach before, so this is something that's new, and I've thought about this quite a bit and thought it was a good thing to try out for this training plan to kind of see how that works. I've talked with multiple athletes that I've worked with before, where we're talking about, how to implement brick sessions. And, I've never really approached it this way before. Most of my athletes don't have this kind of high volume plan. So there's really no need to execute it that way. But this is a high volume plan that I'm testing out. And so that's the reason behind it. So on Saturday, I did my run first, and I had really good performance. For me, the paces were significantly faster than what I've been able to hold before. And so I am seeing the benefits of the strength work in the weight room and really focusing on controlling my body and really telling it what to do and not having my body kind of like tell me what it will do. And so I think that I'm really seeing the benefits of my really big focus on strength building for this past probably year and a half now that I've been trying to rebuild strength. And so it's paying dividends, and I'm happy to see that. And so my increase in speed has not been the result of just running more. It's actually become the result of getting stronger. So I'm able to run with better form, and I'm able to be more efficient and in control. And that in itself is bringing the speed. And so, there's more than one way to get fast, and it's not necessarily always running more or just running faster. Yes, you do have to actually run faster, but it's not the only way to get fast. So my run this week was pretty good. So I'm going to go with that. The bike this week was pretty solid, very similar to last week. So what I'm doing in this plan is I'm rolling with 2-week blocks. So basically what I do is I kind of keep duration the same over 2 weeks. And then in that third week, I bump up, and then I hold it again constant. So they're done in 2-week in 2-week blocks. So this week I had a total training volume of 7 hours and 15 minutes. So it was a standard week. I had, a big gear session that was in there on the trainer, executed that really well, liked that performance. I'm going to test out something new this week for the big gear session. So maybe next week when I release it, next week's video, we'll talk about how that went. I'm not going to talk about it now. I don't know how it's going to go, but we're going to test something out new and see how the body responds. But I did do some really short, like threshold intervals on one of my sessions. I call them the Zone 4 30s and 60s. So they're 30-second Zone 4 efforts with 30 seconds of rest, and then it feeds right into 60-second Zone 4 effort with 30-second rest. And so, by the time you get, and there's 8 of those each, so there's a total of 16 rounds in that workout. And it's a fairly short workout, and I do that, and I like that workout because it's short. We can throw in a lot of intensity without much risk, and the duration of those hard efforts are fairly short, and so are the rest intervals. So you're able to keep the heart rate elevated. It doesn't drop as much, and by doing it that way. So I really liked it. I found that I was able to hit like the Zone 4 target pretty well, actually, and I felt like I had more to give. And so I'm adjusting that workout this week. I'm going to keep the same structure, but I'm pushing it into Zone 5 area territory. So we're going to see how that goes. It's a new workout. That's not something that I have in my library of workouts. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll talk about that next week on whether I actually keep that workout and add it to my library of workouts to select from. Let's talk about the long ride this week. So it was on Saturday. I chose kind of not a different route, but it was an extension of the route. So I had plans on Saturday evening that I needed to keep. And so what I had to do is I didn't have a whole lot of time to spend driving to my normal trailhead start for my ride. So I altered it and drove someplace closer, but it ultimately got me, when I got deeper into the ride, it basically put me at the starting point that I normally would have. So, a large portion of the ride was still on the same course that I'm typically riding, but there was an earlier segment, it's like 13 or 14 miles of a route that I used to ride years ago and didn't really like it then, but I just rode it because it was convenient. And I was reminded why I don't really like the route. It puts me into downtown Richmond. And so it's right along the riverfront. They've built up this whole area now. And so it's jam packed with people. And just the people just weren't very nice on the trail. And it's not conducive to what I'm trying to achieve. And so, lesson learned. From going forward, I'm just going to take the time to drive to my normal spot and start from there. It definitely reduced the overall quality of what I felt like in terms of my enjoyment from the ride. My performance was a little bit less than it was last week. I got fewer miles. I got 63 miles this week compared to 67 miles in the previous week, because the section that ended up getting cut off is a flatter section, so I can kind of open things up a little bit and generate some more speed. But the section that I added on that is new is really hilly, so there's a lot of hill climbs, and so it kind of slowed me down. My power, I just think that the way that I just pedal and the way that I'm able to handle my bike, my power wasn't all that different compared to last week. It was very, very similar, in the same ballpark. So, but I felt like I rode harder. So I'm still trying to figure that one out. I'm not quite sure on how to interpret what happened on Saturday, but I do know I enjoyed it less. And so, lesson learned, if I'm going to spend this kind of time I'm going to do something that I'm going to go places where I really enjoy and just take the time. I executed my nutrition plan during that ride effectively, still testing out, still trying to train the gut a little bit on this high carb mix, but it's working actually. So I have no GI issues coming off the bike. I do think that the one little ray of sunshine that I'm seeing now from my bike training is that I'm finishing these bikes with more in the tank. And so I'm feeling strong, I'm feeling good, and I'm not feeling just beat up and done. So I seem to be working in this new saddle that I put on my road bike, starting to kind of, break that in a little bit. It's the exact same saddle that I have on my gravel bike, and I needed a new saddle for the road bike. So I went ahead before this training plan started. I said, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get the saddle and replace the one that I had on there and go with it, because I really like the saddle that's on my gravel bike. But it's taken some getting used to and breaking it in. And so that's what I'm kind of like trying to tell myself, kind of the discomfort that I felt during weeks kind of like 1 and 2. I think some of that is just driven, from just getting into that kind of training. And part of it could be coming from, a brand new saddle that you're just trying to break in. So, but I'm coming off the bike feeling good and feeling strong. So it's a big boost of confidence going into next week. Next week, we're going to see, I see a little bump in my training volume. And so the time goes up. So this week was another 3.5 hour ride. I wasn't as long as last week as well, which can kind of explain just the shortened miles, the fewer miles that I got. But, I executed this ride really, really well, came in basically right on time. I was short maybe like a minute and a half, but I wasn't about to like ride around in the parking lot just to get the planned duration. Those are just junk miles. Those do nothing actually for me. So I just called it and started to pack things up. It was a good ride though. So next week I'll bump up to 3 hours and 45 minutes. Everything increases. So, my swim volume will increase, run volume increases, bike fall. The only thing that doesn't really change is the strength component. That stays fairly constant. I'm thinking through this training plan until I get to the peak where I'll actually reduce, as I said before in another episode, I'll reduce my strength training by removing the lower body stuff, because I'm going to get enough of that during the aerobic conditioning with the bike sessions and the run sessions. So I don't want to continue to add more and more stress by doing functional, resistance based work. It's just not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze for that instance. So like the bike was really good this week, so I enjoyed it. Looking forward to next week. I'm having a blast on that gravel bike. I wish I could be on it more than just the one day, but that one day I really enjoy because all my other sessions are on the road bike. So when you get to get on a different bike and you're outside on the trails, it's like a little breath of fresh air, So it's nice. We got quite a bit of rain on Saturday, and so that made this morning's ride. The trails were a little soft. There was no standing water or anything, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I did have to, be a little bit more cautious than what I was last week. I think my speed was a little bit lower, my power was a little bit lower than what it was last week for today's ride, which was the gravel. The gravel ride was 1:05, but the route that I've been using, I can get it done in 1:10. And so rather than trying to find a different route that will shave off 5 minutes, I've just been going a little long and just accepting the extra 5 minutes of riding. It's riding, so I'm going to take it. But that was the bike for the week. Like I said, looking forward to next week. Swims. This week I put in 8,800 yards was my total weekly volume. So I have 3 swims in my training plan. This week I had 2 by 3K swims and then 1 by, I think it was 2.8K. So that's the Tuesday swim, man. It's rough. And so what I did was that Tuesday swim was typically kind of like an effort swim, and I've adjusted that and I've taken the efforts out. And so I'm doing some just shorter, just 100 intervals, but I'm, rotating in swims and pull with paddles and stuff. So I'm changing things up. So that in itself injects a little bit more time into the workout as you're transitioning between these different intervals or interval structures. But I'm finding my energy levels on Tuesdays to be really lagging. And so that Tuesday evening swim is a real like struggle bus kind of swim. And I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, my intervals are short, because what I've found is like the past 2 weeks, even though like the watch is saying, I'm swimming for about an hour, a little less than an hour, but I'm actually in the water for like an hour and a half. And so what I do is I don't necessarily keep my watch running during some of my recoveries. So I'll actually pause it so it trims off that rest session so it doesn't get captured. Training Peaks does not capture, it doesn't account for your rest intervals anyway. So if you use a Garmin and you're using Training Peaks, every time you hit that rest button, Training Peaks is not capturing that in what it displays as your swim time. Garmin, like if you go to Garmin Connect, it will. And so I said, well, I want them to be fairly close in duration. So sometimes I don't really care on how long I'm resting, because I'm willing to take a longer rest period so that I'm swimming with good form. So to me, that's more important than keeping my heart rate elevated and getting a quote unquote good workout. A good workout for me is swimming with good form and being able to execute it well, not just like, oh, I burned this many calories and, I swam in this amount of time. To me, that kind of defeats the purpose, because all you're doing is you're reinforcing bad form, which is going to not make you a better swimmer. It's going to make you a worse swimmer or a less efficient swimmer. And a less efficient swimmer is a worse swimmer. So what I did was I said, well, I'm curious as to why I'm feeling this way. So I went into my analytics system that I've got and I said, well, I want to look at each day of the week, Monday through Sunday, and calculate what is the total training volume in hours for the 4 days preceding that day. So if we're looking at I guess I should have kept this up on the screen. So for Monday, it doesn't include Mondays. It includes Sunday, Saturday, Friday, and Thursday. So I take all those days, add up the total training volume, and display that. So I did that for every single day because I kind of wanted to see what accumulated fatigue I was bringing into that day's training session, trying to see maybe why I'm feeling that way. And what I found, and I'll display the graphic. So here you'll see this is a graph of that analysis where Sunday through Wednesday has an average of 10 hours and 23 minutes in the 4 days preceding that day. Thursday through that average is about 8 hours and 46 minutes. The biggest day is Sunday, where I'm coming in with 10 hours and 49 minutes of accumulated training for the previous 4 days, which makes sense because Saturday is a huge training volume day. I mean, it's a big bulk. So right now it's over 4 hours on Saturday in that one day. But, so I was trying to figure out, I was like, okay, do I just have a bad distribution of training throughout the days of the week, even though I feel like I have my workout sequenced appropriately and the intensity is distributed appropriately? Maybe the volume itself is lopsided, the way that I've structured the plan, or the way that I've been forced to structure the plan. Because there are just some days where I have to do a workout, this particular workout on this day, for other reasons, whether it's scheduling or whatever. But I would like to see a little bit more of a evenly distributed, accumulated training volume for those days, but it can't be perfect. And so these are the cards that I'm dealt. So I got to figure out how to manage that. And I have looked at this week to see if I can move things around and shift workouts. And from what I could see is like there was like one day I could switch a couple workouts in these 2 days, and it would shift only effectively 20 to 30 minutes from one day to the other. I don't know if that's really worth the effort, especially, now with this, as I talked about last week, I'm now in the office like 60% of the time. So it's 3 days a week. So, my mornings are even more compressed on those days. So I don't know if it's worth the extra stress of trying to move things around and still being able to get to places on time. And so now that I have a little bit more insight as to why I feel that way on Tuesday, I may be a little bit more gracious with myself and just say, okay, well, this is why I'm feeling this way. And knowing it is half the battle. And I could be completely wrong, but it seemed like a reasonable explanation. But this is another good reason why we capture data. And, I have a master's degree in economics. So, I understand data, and I've been doing this in my professional career for over 20 years of analytics. And so, I understand how to analyze data and how to interpret. And so I've built a pretty big database of all of my workouts over the years. And so I've built a reporting system that I have a business intelligence platform that I've developed because this is what I do. This is what I do to pay the bills. I'm a business intelligence developer. And so I've built something like that to interpret and display my training data. And, I'm a data dork. I know that's fine, but it allows me to have this kind of insights into, what my training is like and how to make me a better coach and a better athlete. So I think that this is a great tool that I'm kind of rebuilding, because I started one dashboard and didn't like the data model that it was sitting on. So I've kind of started over and building out a new one. So I like it, and I like the information that I'm getting out of it. Today, I had my endurance swim, and so it was a big boost of confidence. I didn't really know how it was going to go, because today there was going to be the intervals were 600s. And so, it was another 3K swim with some fairly long intervals. My goal is just to try and hold form. And so I was kind of curious on how I was going to do. Last week I did pretty well. This week I was like, okay, well, I'm not quite sure. It's an extra 100 for each one. And so let's just see. And I actually felt really strong. I felt like I got a good pull through the water. My elbows were cooperating today. So I don't know if the anti-inflammatory meds have kind of like chilled out the heat that's in those elbows, but I did get some more compression sleeves, like little elbow compression sleeves. And so I'm sleeping in them now, and I put them on after my swim workouts to try and help take some of the pressure off and take the tension off of some of those muscles. But it seems to be working. So I'll go with it. It is a big boost of confidence today that I was able to execute those intervals as I go into next week, where I'll increase again to 700, and we're just slowly building and just rolling through, stacking on volume week over week, and building that up. So I was pretty pleased. So those are the 3 primary sports that I'm focusing on. I had a great run. I had a good run week. I had a great bike week. a better swim week. Finally, I got like week 4, whereas it was kind of a mixed bag from the Tuesday swim, but I'm going to throw that out now that I kind of have a little bit more understanding on why I may be feeling that way. And so it's not that I have lack of fitness or just, you know, poor, bad workouts or whatever. So I kind of have a little bit more understanding. And the other swim that I did is kind of what's called the pull and paddle session. So it's a more upper body strength work in the water, and so I've tweaked that this week. I still have that same structure, but it's even more focused because I think that there were just some straight swim intervals that are in there, but I've removed those because I really want to focus on just the pull and paddle. So have that session just be pull and paddles because I believe that's important for me to build that upper body strength and that muscular endurance to help with swimming in the wetsuit and being able to hold form for those long intervals. So let's move into the strength sessions. I had my 3 standard strength sessions. So it's 2 upper body sessions. So they're push-pull efforts and then a lower body. I executed the plan, felt great, felt strong, increased weight in many of the movements, and so I'm seeing some nice progress. This new method that I've been using with a muscular endurance focus, where it's really higher reps and compared to what I was doing before, which was a block of like strength and power work, low reps, high weight. This time, my weight isn't really all that different. I did reduce it in order to get the reps, but I'm getting the reps. And so I'm feeling really, really good. And I'm starting to kind of see the change in my body, which is reinforcing how I'm feeling. So I'm starting to look stronger. So when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm starting to see some definition in areas. I'm starting to look stronger, which reinforces how I'm feeling because I'm feeling stronger. And so it's giving me a lot of confidence. And so I think that that's what that's all about. The strength supports the swim, bike, and run. It lays the foundation because without that foundation, you cannot be a consistent triathlete with the swim, bike, and run. The body does not hold up unless you are just one where it's just gifted. You're a gifted athlete. Then consider yourself lucky. But I can almost guarantee you as you get older, no matter how gifted you are, things start to break down. And so you really do have to bring in that strength component as we all age. And I'm 48 years old. And so and also a gastric bypass patient, over the years. And so, my body did cannibalize a lot of my muscle from the rapid weight loss, and with all the focus on endurance work and the aerobic conditioning, I didn't put any focus on getting stronger and rebuilding the muscle that I lost from the rapid weight loss. And so it really set me up for being more injury prone. And so as I've now kind of discovered how important it is, and now that I'm doing my own coaching and I'm self-coaching myself, this is the approach that I wanted to go. And I'm seeing the dividends. It's really unfortunate that it had to take me so long to get here, to realize how important it is. I wish I didn't have such a big hill to climb to get stronger, but I'm doing it and making progress. This week, the strength stuff stays the same. There's no difference. I don't switch out the movements or anything like that. I don't need a whole lot of change in that. I do tend to keep my strength workouts consistent around 12 weeks. So I'll do the same strength movements for 12 weeks. And then at the end of that block, I'll change things up. So, it's just trying to hit muscles from different angles, maybe different approaches. With this one, this is a 16-week plan for Ironman Florida. So I may just actually keep the push-pull sessions the same for the whole 16 weeks, since I am making a change during the peak phase of the training plan by removing the leg stuff. So we'll see. It doesn't really matter that much. It's just, I'm going to go with that. Overall, so let's just talk about the overall week. I'm just kind of staring at my notes here. So I think it was a good week, despite the stress that's there, the professional stress from work. This is also the week that I had my son. And so that always brings another layer of stress and responsibility, but honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. My responsibilities as a father and a parent did not change simply because my marriage status changed. So from day one, I've been present and active and have shared custody with my two sons. They were with me every other week. And so, I've always been there. That was really, really important to me from the very start. And so, it is unfortunate that my sons have had to grow up in that kind of situation, where it's like, 1 week with me and then 1 week with their mom. But there's nothing that I could do about it. But I do know that I really wanted to be a present and active father, and that was really important. And so that's a sacrifice that I made. There were things that I definitely couldn't do because of it, but I'm happy to have made that trade-off. So I was listening to the video from last week, and it reminded me that I did think about something. And so this is going to be, like I said before, there's a little segment of this video that I want to use for insights from the week. And, typically these insights have been kind of like personal and vulnerable kind of stuff. This week, I'm not quite sure. I've been kind of racking my brain on kind of what I wanted to share. There's a lot of things that have been going on in the world, with Charlie Kirk and things. And I'm really torn, and I didn't quite know what I was going to say. So I'm just going to say this. I do have my personal thoughts and feelings on that situation, but this is, I am an athlete in this video and in this series. If you want to know how I feel about the situation that surrounds Charlie's death, I'm more than happy to share that with you, but I'm not going to do it on this open forum. Just like I don't feel that athletes should, say most of the stuff that they say and get involved in that kind of stuff. They're paid to do a job. They're an athlete. Do the athlete job. And so that's what I've decided. I do feel as a Christian, it is my duty to say something about the situation, but I don't believe that this is the appropriate venue to do that. Like I said, if you want to know what my thoughts and feelings are, I'm more than happy to share those with you, but it will be in a different medium than this. So there's that. And so my insights from this week is, I said last week that I kind of wanted to go back and see how my training volume for this race is compared to my previous 70.3 efforts. And as I've said, I have a huge database that I've built of all of my workouts and my races. So I was able to go in to my database, and I will pop up a graphic on what I produced from my analysis for this. So my search criteria, so as I said, I've done 8 70.3s before this race. So this will be my 9th 7. My search criteria for this was, I was interested in finding all the 70.3s that I've done where there has been at least 16 weeks between 70.3 races. Because there were some years where I did multiple 70.3s in that year. And so I said, well, if I have 2 70.3 races, but there's less than 16 weeks between those two efforts, then I don't want to use that second race as part of my population. And so I wanted to make sure that I could try to keep the scenario as similar as to what I'm doing right now, because this is a 16-week plan. I've had no other 70.3s this year. And so, I want to pull from a similar population. So I'm looking back, and of the 8 that I've done, 5 of those 70.3s met that criteria, where there was at least 16-week spread between 2 70.3s. The other, the other 3, I think had like 10 to 12 weeks. So I didn't think that those were comparable, and so I tossed those out. So here's the graphic right here. So my overall training average, the overall average volume for those 5 races was 10 hours and 56 minutes. So over the 16-week, I just took the simple average for each week, spanning all the weeks, and it came out to 10 hours and 56 minutes. So far, through week 3 for Ironman Florida, my average is 17 hours and 10 minutes. Pretty significant difference, like massive difference. And so, if I were to remove the strength component from the Florida race that I'm training for right now, my average is about 13 hours and 24 minutes of training volume. Still a pretty big difference from the 10 hours and 56 minutes that I've done in the past. So I said, well, So let's see, it's about, 2.5 hours more. So I said, well, I've only gotten through week 4 of this training plan. So let's look, rather than, because all those other ones I had 16 weeks of data to pull from, but I only have 4 weeks of data to pull for this race. So I said, well, how does the first 4 weeks of all of these 5 other races, how do those look like compared to what I see now through week 4? And the overall average was 10 hours and 26 minutes. Really not that much of a difference between the entire 16-week average for those races. So it's just a difference of like 30 minutes. And so, those approaches that I guess was used for those previous races, very different than what I'm using here, because my training plan is still going to grow, and it's going to get upwards of 20, even a little bit higher in terms of weekly volume. So I still have room to grow in this. So this is a significantly different approach this time around than my previous races. But my thought is that it's okay to experiment. Did those other training plans work? Yes, they worked. I finished all the races, got the medals, learned tons about myself, and they were all completions. So you could consider the trainings successful. Now, rather than just go back and just execute those same kind of similar plans and get similar results, what does that tell me? It doesn't really tell me that much. That tells me that I can reproduce results that I've already produced. It doesn't tell me much, because I know that I could do that. I am older, so there is some kind of level of uncertainty that would be there. But my thought is that it's okay to experiment. It's okay to try different things. In fact, it's what we should be doing. If you know the adage, if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. And so, it's irrational to think that you're going to get different results if you keep doing the same thing. So it's okay to test things out, try things. If it fails, then you've learned something. You've learned what didn't work. When Edison produced the light bulb, it's not like he produced it on the first light bulb. He found hundreds of ways to not make a light bulb. The same principle applies here. There are many different ways to train for a race. So if somebody is telling you that this is the way that you should train, and these are the hours that you should be doing, and these are the miles that you should be putting in, absolutely discount that completely, because there's so many different ways to do this. Every athlete is different. Everybody's time commitments are different. Everybody's bandwidth is different. Everybody's tolerance to training stress is different. And so you have to find ways to incorporate your training into your life that you can recover and adapt to. And without experimentation, you never really learn what works and what doesn't work. And so this is what I've committed to for these 16 weeks is I'm trying something new. I'm trying a high training volume by keeping the strength in there as well, to see how my body handles that load, not just the aerobic conditioning, but the anaerobic conditioning as well in terms of the strength stuff. And, am I nervous? Absolutely. I am nervous. This could all completely fail and crumble, and I could have a horrible race day and just not be prepared. That is a possibility. It's also a possibility that I could throw in the same training plan and experience the same thing on race day. Something could go horribly wrong. Training could go wrong. Things can happen. Am I nervous on, if I'm able to execute this plan and I have a bad race? Am I concerned on how I'm going to be perceived in terms of how effective of a coach I am or how good of an athlete I am? Sure, I have that level of insecurity. And we just released a podcast episode on performance anxiety, and I talk about that in that episode. Talk about some of the issues that I continue to deal with, levels of insecurity, how I feel that others may perceive me. Now, I wanted to phrase it that way because it's all up here. It's all between these things right here in my ears. And so, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't have a crystal ball. And if any of you guys that are out there and you're going to say, this is going to go horribly wrong, I'd like to see why you feel that way. What other insights do you have that I may not have? I'm willing to listen and hear what you got to say, but I don't know how it's going to go. And that's the whole point of doing this. is I want to learn something. I want to learn that if I push my body this way, what's going to be the result? Could I push it too far? Sure. Could I push it not far enough? That's a possibility. Could I do everything that I'm supposed to do and I execute this plan perfectly and I still have a mediocre or a bad race? Sure. That can happen in triathlon. There's a lot of things that we cannot control. So the idea is in the sport is we control the controllables, but there's things that we just can't control. So I could execute this thing perfectly and still have a bad race. That's a possibility. That's what we sign up for. But the chances, just a possibility that if I try something different and I try this different approach to training and I'm blessed with a great race, then I learn something more about myself and I grow as an athlete. I mature as an athlete. I gain more wisdom, feel like maybe I'll be a better coach. I'll have more insights into how the human body reacts and what things work and what doesn't work and what workouts did I develop during this thing that are brand new workouts. And I tested them out on myself first before I start giving them to athletes and see how they respond to them. But this is why we do what we do. And, I'm coming from it from a perspective as a coach and an athlete. So there's things that I want to test out, not just for me, but for what I may give somebody else to see what kind of results that we could generate for them. Because that's why I do what I do. I'm a coach because I want to help others achieve things that they didn't think that they could possibly achieve. But the work still has to be done by them, and I'm there to support their effort. I'm there to guide them. So I need to have wisdom in order to do that. Do I get it right all the time? No. I have athletes that say, man, that just really did not work. This method didn't work. I didn't really like this training method. Just didn't enjoy it. I didn't get the results that I wanted. We learned. And I'm still working with these athletes. So it's not like they just left and just said, oh, you don't know what you're doing. You're just a bad coach. But I do have that level of insecurity that, if I don't get this athlete to generate these kind of results, what are they going to do? Are they going to leave or what? But that's part of the game too. But I don't know unless we're going to try. And rather than me trying with somebody else, I'm trying it on me. So there's a little bit of nervousness, excitement at the same time to really kind of see what I'm really capable of at the age of 48, given the situation that I'm in and the criteria, the issues that I have to deal with. I'm not going in as an elite athlete that's in fantastic shape and all of my muscles and tendons work. I'm not that guy. And I'm not that athlete. I'm a normal guy, 48 years old. I don't look like a triathlete. I'm a little bigger of a guy, back of the packer, but I'm consistent, I'm motivated, I'm persistent, and I don't give up. And to me, that's more connectable with others. So if you're looking for somebody that is a high performer or a Kona qualifier and you think that they're just going to be a great coach because, they have performance, there's a lot of really good athletes out there that are poor coaches. And that was a conversation that I had with my co-host, Coach Katie, in that podcast episode where we talked about that. So I'm excited. This is the end of week 4 and we're going into week 5. Things are rolling. I think I've kind of woken up a little bit. These first 3 weeks were a little bit of a shock to the body, jumping up from like an average of like 12 to 13 hours of training. And then I jumped right up to like 16. So it's another 3 hours per week, more swim volume, more bike volume, bringing back into the training plan. And so I think that just kind of shocked my system a little bit. And so that's why I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed and a little run down those first few weeks. But I'm starting to feel a little bit more pep. And so I'm glad that I'm starting to see this now. And it's giving me a little bit more confidence. It's like, oh, okay. So it just took a while for my body to cooperate and realize what's going on here. So here we are. We're at the end of week 4, survived, rolling deep, going into week 5. So really excited to test out some new workouts, some new approaches, and see what week 5 gives us. So again, thank you for joining me in the Ironman Florida 70.3 an endurance athlete's journey for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you'll see all the future videos that are going to be coming out. I actually have started pushing out this video as well onto the podcast. So if you look for the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, we're on Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, any of the other platforms that you typically listen to podcasts. I'm going to be releasing these as bonus episodes. So it's not going to replace our normal content that we push out. We release a podcast once a week, and those are on Thursdays. And so I talked to Coach Katie and said, hey, why don't we just throw out some bonus casts? And I'll release the stuff that I'm doing for Ironman Florida as a bonus for the podcast listeners. And so I pushed out the intro episode this past week. So I'll be trying to get caught up and pushing these out so that we'll now become more in sync. So there'll be live stuff, but you can always subscribe to the YouTube channel and you'll see any of the other content that I do come out with. I have some ideas that I'm kind of like rolling through my head on additional stuff to bring out to help others. So thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you have comments, please put them in the comment section. I do monitor the comment section pretty closely. So if there's a question that you guys have, or something that you want to say, please post that out there. I'm happy to respond. If you want to send me a direct message, you can do that through the website as well. All of the week 4 workouts are posted on the website as well. So you can see those images and you can download the PDF for the week, which has all of the workout details, all the structures and intervals and everything that I did. And you can take a look, right? So thank you very much. Rolling on to week 5. And I will see you guys again next week. All right. Enjoy your week. Good night.